Well, the battle over the Strait of Hormuz continues, and it is the fifth straight day of U.S. strikes on Iran. The American military has said that this wave of strikes targeted Iranian military capabilities, and these were capabilities used to threaten vessels moving through Hormuz. Iranian state media reported explosions in several cities, including Bandar Abbas, Rask, and Jabar. Earlier, reports also cited blasts around southern sites, including Qasem and Bandar Imam Khomeini, Bushehr, which is home to Iran's only civilian nuclear plant. It was also hit. U.S. Central Command also said that it has separately fired on a ship attempting to violate its renewed blockade on Iran's ports. Iran, on the other hand, struck U.S. military targets in the region, including in Bahrain and Kuwait. Then on Tuesday, the U.S. president threatened to attack bridges and power plants should Iran not return to talks next week. Asked by reporters whether he would give a deadline before doing so, Trump said he doesn't give deadlines.
I don't like giving deadlines, but they pretty much know, they know the story. Sorry, they better behave.
He also reiterated that Iran badly wants to reach a settlement with the U.S., adding that Washington has yet to decide whether to settle the matter or finish it off.
We're doing really well with Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran is not happy right now. Should have been done 47 years ago. Should have been done at least during the 47-year period. And it wasn't. Other presidents didn't do what was right. They should have done it a long time ago. Would have been much easier. And they want to settle so badly. They don't like what we're doing. And they do want to settle. We'll find out whether or not we settle with them or we just finish it off.
Vice President JD Vance has said that the U.S. has no plans to deploy ground troops, arguing that diplomacy, not prolonged military action, offers the only lasting solution to the crisis between Washington and Tehran. Iran, however, seems to be pulling away from the Memorandum of Understanding. Speaker and top negotiator Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf told state media that Tehran had no reason to abide by the deal if it did not benefit from it. Hormuz remains at the heart of the escalating tensions. The escalation came after Trump said a 20% toll has been threatened. He had threatened to impose in Hormuz would be replaced by massive trade and investment deals with Gulf states. Now, the U.S. also implemented a blockade of Iranian ports. Iran thereafter said that Hormuz was closed until further notice, and the choke point saw low traffic, with a maritime tracker reporting only 21 transits on Tuesday. All right, to discuss this further with me, I'm now being joined by Jennifer Ewing, spokesperson for the Republicans Overseas UK, joining us from London. Jennifer, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for making time. Starting right off, does Donald Trump really have a strategy to end this war?
I don't believe he does at the moment. And I think that's part of the reason, which, your news referenced, is why the vice president went on one of the most popular podcasts in the world, Joe Rogan, and laid out what a lot of us in the Trump coalition who voted for Trump for starting no new wars belief system was. Let's use diplomacy to de-escalate this as soon as possible. We cannot just continue to bomb forever, especially without a plan. So what's interesting about what the vice president said, and actually makes me very, very hopeful for these, the war coming to an end sooner rather than later, is that he pointed out some very, very big differences, or some very, very big points rather, which, number one, he's talking about influencers who are trying to influence U.S. politicians, i.e. the hawkish side of the war, that would just like the bombing to continue forever, versus the more non-intervention side, which of course the vice president has always been a part of. He even reminds people that President Trump, several times when talking about the war, said, well, JD Vance is a little less, quote, enthusiastic about our actions in Iran than, some of the other people in his cabinet. So this is very interesting discussion. I would encourage everybody to listen to it, because I do hope with this information out there and finally being said by somebody as important as the vice president that things can de-escalate. He talks about, the main goal is now getting the gas free flowing. and ensuring that Iran does not have a nuclear program. And he says we want to do that, number one, with diplomacy,
Understood.
and then number two, with military actions when possible.
All right, now let's discuss that, both those points. Vice President is batting for diplomacy, not military action, definitely not troops on the ground, whereas the President, it continues with the ultimatums, and the military action is the fifth straight day, and it's continuing. It's right back where we were back in March, and the entire area the hostilities are surging. But when you look at diplomacy, last year, the Operation Midnight Hammer, it started in the middle of negotiations, in the middle of diplomatic efforts. This year, Feb 28th, again the war started in the middle of diplomatic efforts. Then the ceasefire, again, it fell apart. There was scope for diplomatic talks at that time, did not work. Then the Memorandum of Understanding, which almost seems to be hanging by a thread at this point, again, diplomatic efforts did not work. Military actions clearly are not working. Is there any option at all, regardless of who you follow, the President or the Vice President?
Well, I think, and you're right, and it is hanging by a thread, and I think it's all what they're calling, the Article 5, or the point about there was a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation between Iran and the U.S. on what Article 5, not NATO Article 5, of course, but Article 5 meant about which parts of the strait. But the answer is, I think, it's got to be that the American people do not want our Fifth Fleet, and we do not want our troops to be, basically looking after this part of the world in perpetuity. So it's going to have to be, whether it's the Gulf countries, whether it's Europe, whether it's China, whether it's Oman, Iran, whomever it is, there's going to have to be other people that take over the strait to make sure that it reopens so things can flow again. As you mentioned, this 20%, tax that was talked about for about, 24 hours, that was never going to happen. So de-escalation really is the only way. And I think they're going to have to get back to the MOU, because that's what the people of America voted for. This is a wildly unpopular war, even within the Trump coalition, which is why I think you're seeing the Vice President come out and explain things in a more nuanced way.
Understood. At this point, Jennifer, do you feel the war has fallen hostage to Donald Trump's whims?
A bit, yes. And while I don't make excuses for him, he is the leader of the free world. I believe back in February, he was encouraged, shall we say, to go ahead with this after what happened in Venezuela. Now, what happened in Venezuela, I think most people can see, was more of an internal palace coup, right? Obviously, Delcy Rodriguez was involved in that. And I think the hawks, the people, including inside our own government and outside countries, who wanted Trump to, go to war with Iran and have wanted this for 47 years, told him this would be really, really easy. Iran is weak. We can get this done very quickly. And that, of course, was not true. So, is this now his whims? Well, you just listed off a number of things that had been tried. And you're right. We are back to now March, where there's, bombs flying. Now, we're not bombing inside of Tehran like we were back in March and April, but it's still turned kinetic again.
Yes. And on that point, Jennifer, when the war started, there are reports that suggest that it was Israel, essentially Netanyahu, who really convinced, or eventually it was Donald Trump who finally agreed with what Netanyahu had attempted with a number of earlier US presidents as well. And it was no one else. There were at least 18 intelligence agencies which were listed out, mentioning that there was no imminent threat from Iran, at least not towards the US. Israel has always maintained there is a threat towards them. And at this same point in February, even the Gulf nations told the US that Iranian missiles are aimed towards us. They had intelligence and they requested to not engage. There was a close circle within Donald Trump's side also telling him do not engage. The armada around Iran built up for a good amount of weeks, and then finally the kinetic action started. So there were enough voices asking the president do not engage. So at this point, when the war is now, we're months down the line, far ahead of that 4 to 5 weeks timeline, war is at Donald Trump's whims. It's hostage to him. What is the future at this point? Is it all now just in Donald Trump's hands, where he is able to take that bitter pill and just back off?
Well, I hope that he's taking advice from people like the vice president. And you're right. Back in February, there was a room full of people who were telling him, "Hey, Iran is not about to launch a nuclear attack." You'll know that DNI, the head of DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, resigned. Joe Kent resigned. A lot of people who are very much against this war basically were told to sort of pipe down and either resigned as a result of it or were not listened to. So I am hoping that this is a shift and that now he will be listening to the non-interventionists who said there is and the most important thing is for people who voted for Trump to be America first. How is this in America's interest? And I don't think people believe whether it is a certain hawkish community within the US or Israel or these influencers that are talked about in the Time magazine article saying, the US has been at war with Iran for 47 years. I don't think we've really heard that every day in the news for the last 47 years. I think most people agree they don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, but I don't think this was on the top 10 list of people's voting issues when they elected the president, nor if you were to poll people today, nor is it one of their top 10 issues now. It remains the economy and border control. And this is quite frankly, it's a distraction and a major distraction from what Americans voted for, and one with downstream effects like higher gas prices. There's also an opportunity cost. If we are constantly talking about the straits open, the straits not open, what's going on in Lebanon, we're not talking about things like pass the Save America Act or let's continue our deportation of illegal criminals. So it is a problem for the president, and I believe he finally gets the message that this is not what the American people wanted. And unfortunately for him, this, clearly now, what are we, over 100 days into this, is not something like Venezuela that was going to be done in 48 hours.
Jennifer, on a personal note, I must add that as spokesperson for the Republicans overseas, UK, this is for all our audiences, it's very telling when we hear somebody like you and on your position mentioning so openly that there is complete disillusionment regarding what Donald Trump is doing, who's largely representing the Republicans in America at this point. The midterms will definitely be more telling in time to come. It's just around the corner now. Jennifer Ewing, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much. There will be more to discuss. Look forward to speaking with you again.
Thanks.